So New Era, Colorado registered about 12,000 mostly young voters this year, this election cycle. And a lot of them are going to be first-time voters that have never voted before in Colorado. During the mandatory voter registration drive training at the Secretary of State's office, I asked the specific question, what do we do when a young voter approaches us, wants to register to vote, has a Colorado driver's license, but does not have it on them? So a lot of times students will have a driver's license but won't have it on them. Maybe it's in their dorm room. They specifically told us, register them to vote, have them use the last 4 digits of their social security number, and just make sure they do not check that checkbox, the infamous checkbox that we're told everybody had to check. And we were specifically told, inform them to not check the checkbox. Because if they did check it and they do have a driver's license, then they would essentially be lying on a federal and state form. So some of those voters are now in the position, and they've received letters saying that their registration is incomplete and they won't be eligible to vote in the upcoming election because they didn't check that checkbox.
So when we decided to start a voter registration campaign this cycle, we signed up to attend the training at the Secretary of State's office. We wanted to be completely clear on what the process would be for our staff to follow during our voter registration drive. At the training, we went over a paper manual with the point person from the Secretary of State, and in the section relevant to identification, it seemed clear from both the paper manual and from what the point person had said to me that it was possible for voters to use either a Colorado driver's license or the last 4 digits of the social security number. That was an important point to me because that's certainly key. We wanted our registration forms to be filled out correctly by these voters.
And we went in for a training. Ceci Gomez was the one who provided the training. We walked through the packet and through all aspects of the voter registration form and how they'd want us to do it. And when we got to the identification part, I specifically asked about this. So she said, here's the driver's license number or the last 4 of the social. And I specifically asked at a lot of our events, right, they're site-based, and people might not necessarily have their driver's license, with them or know the number by heart. So is it okay in those situations just to put the last 4 of their social security number? She said that was fine, but don't check the box because they do in fact have a driver's license. So then that would look contrary to their record if they did in fact have one. They pulled that up when they were processing the form. So I got clarification on that specifically because I knew that was going to be an issue that would come up when we were registering people. So that's what she said, go ahead, use the last 4, just don't check the box. So we've been doing that since, that was I think in March. So since then we've been registering. My organization as well as our C3 arm have registered a total of almost 4,000 voters this year. And that was the case in many of the situations where they were like, oh, I have a driver's license, I just don't have it with me. Can I just put the last 4? And we said, oh yeah, that's fine. So we've processed all those forms, and now we're being told that some of those might not be counted, or those people might have to vote on provisional ballots.
It's certainly not clear to me, why all of a sudden these registrations would be deemed incomplete, especially since all of our groups were turning in hundreds of forms, using social security numbers to county clerks, often in person. At no time did anyone indicate that these registrations were somehow inappropriate or invalid or following, a standard that was unacceptable.
So I think a lot of county clerks, as well as some people within Mike Coffman's office, his own office, were operating under the assumption that it was just fine to put the last 4 of the social instead of the driver's license, that it was an equally valid way of showing identification, until Secretary Coffman himself decided to change the practices there in mid-September.
We haven't heard anything from the Secretary of State's office. We've contacted them, we've requested a meeting to discuss this, to move forward together, not necessarily make it like we're pointing fingers, and really just resolve this issue as quickly as possible before the election. We haven't heard anything. We've had no response.
Well, it's a big issue because, when we're out in the field registering voters, it's definitely the easiest thing for a voter to provide the last 4 digits of the social security number. So, the vast majority of our voters who did newly register use the last 4 digits of their social security number, which are valid, certainly a valid identification number. And at this point, these registrations are being deemed incomplete by the Secretary of State, and they're basically being asked to register again, with only a few weeks before the election. It's certainly a burden on the voter, and it's an issue because the communications from the Secretary of State and the county clerks have been inconsistent and confusing. So we really just want to make sure that all these voters who provided a valid identification number are allowed to cast their vote, in this election.
I think the solution is for all of the voter registration forms to be processed and to be equally counted and validated, and for those people to be able to vote just like everyone else on election day, or voting by mail if they chose to do that when they registered. So, and I think that after this election, to get the story straight within their own office and with the county clerks, get on the same page with this, and then actually have consistent trainings for next year.
You know, as someone who runs an organization that does get young people more involved in politics, gets a lot of young people to register to vote for their first time. Some of these voters are not going to be able to vote after all. It's extremely disappointing. I mean, it's preposterous, frankly, that because of a technicality, we would bar someone from participating in the basic right of voting.
The issue is, how do we correct this situation? You know, we want these voters to vote. You know, we want a solution that is quick, a solution that is easy. You know, the best solution is to accept these registration forms as complete. You know, we really want to focus on how to move forward as quickly as possible. You know, our interest as Maryland, having all the voters who submitted complete identification, you know, valid identification, that it's possible for the county clerks to confirm. You know, there's no issue with the Social Security number. So, you know, that being the case, you know, we just want to fix this.
Many of these people are first-time voters in Colorado. Some of them are first-time voters, period. These are the exact people that we should be absolutely encouraging more than anybody else to participate in the election process. And we're just making them go through more hoops, which is unfortunate.